proud, especially when Kevin chose the headline, "You Recycle Wrong." I felt like we were kind of waving a big stick. But I think we probably all admit that we do mess up when it comes to recycle. I know when I pick up something that's plastic, I kind of say, is this acceptable or is it not acceptable? And I kind of go, I don't have a clue. So today we're here to talk about that. Before we begin, happy Valentine's Day. If nobody says that to you, we're saying it at Forum. We appreciate you, we like you, we're glad you're here. Our speakers today are Kevin and Gabrielle Clay. They are co-owners of Mela, right? How do you say it? Mela Environmental Services. And they have a pretty similar background. Both of them grew up on the Eastern Slope. They both went to the same high school. They both graduated from CU. Kevin from Boulder and Gabrielle from CU Denver. And Kevin also did some graduate work at Grand Canyon University. I'll talk about Gabrielle first. After college, she took an EHS safety program manager job with a family-owned oil distributing company, and that kind of set her off in that direction. She has worked with small Colorado companies, big ones like Valvoline and ExxonMobil. She took a big jump to consulting and got hooked up with the National Park Service and has actually served as the environmental coordinator for the National Park Service for 7 regions, all the way from Alaska to Maine. So she has a really deep background in this. She's worked for multinational companies like Hitachi and Tesla. And it's her work with the National Park Service that also kind of brought on her second career. She is also Studio 14 by Gabrielle on Main Street in Montrose, an award-winning photographer. And so she kind of wears 2 hats. Today she'll be talking about this hat, but please know that she's on Main Street as well. Kevin has 18 years of experience, clients like National Park Service, Department of the Interior, Department of Energy, many private and commercial clients, not only in Colorado, but throughout the United States. And so, although they're based here, their work is everywhere. And they'll probably explain some of that as they talk to us today. In 2020, they started Mela Environmental Services. They're a 2-person team, but have partners in 7 states, and as I said, work throughout the United States doing environmental services. Today they're here to tell us how we recycle wrong. And so it's my pleasure to hand the mic over to Gabrielle. Please welcome Gabrielle and Kevin Clay.
Wow, that was pretty cool. Thank you. Thanks you guys for having us. I can't beat that intro. I don't think I could write my own intro as well as you just introduced us, so thank you so much. So as she mentioned, we're Mela Environmental Services. You'll also see another logo up here, ETC. We do a lot of training. So we were traveling around the country and identifying all these things and making these accusatory statements about how people are doing things wrong. And then we thought, gosh, wouldn't it be cool if we could be part of the solution? So we've started a training consultancy too. So we're trying to do things like this all over the country, talk to people about recycling, solid waste, and a number of different projects that we're doing so that we can help communities do better, meet requirements, and just feel better about how the community is recycling and managing solid waste, and also the slew of environmental regulations that are required of all of our communities. And then we like to make sure that employees working at all the businesses that we work with are safe. So we do a lot of training on that as well. So I've been doing this for 20 years, a variety of different ways, whether it was in private industry or through consulting. And yes, working with the National Park Service was a dream come true. For another event that I attended the other day, I was asked, well, what do you do for fun? So it's a really interesting question. When you do what you love for work, everything is fun. So it was hard to separate, you know, what do I do for work, what do I do for fun? Because I am so blessed that I'm able to love everything that I do. So in 2005, I met my mentor, who is Frank Prisnar. He's in Washington, D.C., and he owned a little itty-bitty consulting firm called Prism Incorporated. And he said, my big dream is to make sure that the National Park Service understands what they need to do with their environmental and safety programs. I've hired 3 people, just 3 of us, all in Colorado, and he said, I want you 3 ladies to figure out how to implement a program across the National Park Service to manage what's going on with environmental and safety programs. That was a huge undertaking, but I'm still doing it. So I'm still working with 4 of those 7 regions, and it's really exciting. And the Intermountain region right here in Colorado, all up and down this region is my main client right now still, so it's really exciting. Last year, we got to do something extra cool, so something a little above and beyond what we ordinarily do. And I had done something similar in Zion and something similar in the Grand Tetons when I got to partner with Subaru and help with the Zero Waste Initiative. But last year, the National Parks Conservancy reached out to us and said, there's some money, we'd like to spend it on doing even better with our solid waste program. We have a park that's extremely dedicated here at Glacier, up in Montana. Anybody been to Glacier National Park? Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful up there, right? Very busy park. Yes, it is melting. Very busy park, lots of visitors, especially throughout the summer season. So they have a lot of trash coming into the park. They're doing a pretty good job of managing their trash, but they thought, you know, we're just not really sure what's happening to it once it leaves the park. Can you come up and just help us understand? We'd like you to come up and evaluate where we have our trash bins, what things we're recycling, how much of it we're recycling. We also want you to actually just watch visitors, see what they do. We have all these bins that are labeled, but what are people actually doing? You know, in the National Park Service, we have people that come from all over the world. So many of them don't speak English or understand the symbols that we're using for our signage. So our job was not only to actually literally dumpster dive, but also to watch people. What were they doing with their trash? Were they putting it in the right bin? Did they understand what to do with it? And we learned so much, both from the employees as well as from the visitors. And what we learned was people really, really want to do the right thing. No matter where they're from, no matter what language they speak, they really want to do the right thing. But unfortunately, most of us are just doing it wrong. And it's not because of laziness, it's not because we don't know what to do, it's because things become very easily contaminated. So we very quickly understood that if the communication and education piece wasn't really clear, if the signage wasn't clear, and if you couldn't actually open the correct bin, you weren't going to put it in the right place. So the other issue with a lot of national parks is wildlife, right? So the national park's main job is to preserve and protect, and that includes wildlife. So in Glacier, we need to try and figure out how to keep bears out of the trash. So it has taken years, and this is still a problem that's not completely solved, to figure out how to keep bears out of our trash cans. And a lot of times if you bear-proof a trash can, you've kind of human-proofed it too, unfortunately. So sadly, we watched a number of visitors trying to open those recycle bins or those recycle containers, and they would get stuck or would hurt their finger, or they just didn't understand how it opened. So there was a little bit of frustration and then say, oh, forget it, I'm just gonna throw it in the trash, okay? In the campgrounds, we noticed that there were several little pods and stations where you could keep a variety of different types of trash. So at the very front of the campground, there was a trash bin and a recycle bin. Then there was another one scattered. Then there was another, maybe every 10 or 15 campsites, there'd be a dumpster or a recycle bin. But things weren't really consistent. So if I'm a camper and I'm at the far end of the campground and I've been hiking all day long and I come back and I enjoy a bottle of water, I drink a beer or two, whatever, I've got a variety of different types of trash that I want to get rid of. But the only bin that I have available right near my campsite, right before I go to bed, is a recycle bin. I'm just going to put everything in there. So what happens when you put regular trash in with recyclables? It becomes trash. So we started to notice something that was really eye-opening and a little saddening. Most of the trash at Glacier was going to the landfill. They had a very, very low diversion rate. Almost nothing was going into the recycling, specifically around plastic, I would say. So most of the plastics were contaminated. Most of those bins would come, the bags would come out, they'd go back into the Park Service truck, and they'd end up going to the regular landfill. So our job, and we haven't finished this yet because it's a huge undertaking, our job is to help Glacier figure out what to do next. What strategies can we put into place so that we can see that plastic diversion increase, so we can see recyclables going where they should go. So that's going to be a little more difficult than we originally thought, but we've got a few strategies that we've identified through our solid waste report that we are hoping that they're going to start implementing. And that's what Kevin's going to talk to you about today. Because it was such an eye-opening experience for both of us, Kevin really kind of took it on as his baby. It's something that's really become a passion of his. And he learned so much about recycling, things that I never knew, and I've been doing this for 20 years. All kinds of new things that are coming up, new legislation that he's going to explain to you, and new strategies that we really think can help places like Glacier. And ultimately, because we love this community so much, we did some research around what's going on here in Montrose, because we want to make sure that not only are we helping the parks that we're working with or the companies that we're working with, but we want to do the right thing. And then we want to make sure that the community here in Montrose is doing the right thing too. So while our title is a little bit condescending maybe, or a little rude, you are recycling wrong, it's actually our hope to tell you, so these are the things that are going wrong, but here are some suggestions that we have for what we think we could start doing right, a little bit of education around what's coming in the future, and what we're passionate about moving forward. So with that little extended introduction, I'm going to hand the rest of this over to Kevin so he can tell you all about what he learned via work and visit and everything that he's learned through a lot of research around recycling.
Good morning and happy Valentine's Day. Special thanks to Phoebe and Kathy for persuading us to come up here. This is something that's near and dear to my heart, and it's just a portion of what we do. So I'm very excited that there's a lot of people interested to, you willingly came out to be admonished about your recycling practices. So that says a lot about you. She already mentioned vaguely the agenda. Let's just talk about what's currently going on with solid waste and recycling. I'll tell you a little bit about the history of plastics. We'll talk about these acronyms up here, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Federal Trade Commission, and how these are interwoven into new policy, and some emerging legislation that you're going to want to know about. You're going to hear a lot of bad news, but there are some good news about what we're doing right, particularly right here in Montrose, and I'm very, very happy to share that and hopefully build on that. And then something that's interesting to me, we're on a college campus, some emerging technologies in recycling practices. So let's dive into it. But we are on a college campus, so you should have woken up and says there might be a quiz, pop quiz. And you can shout this out. We don't really have time to take a poll. Shout it out. How many pounds of waste does each person in the United States produce per year? Someone said 12,000. 1,000.
200,000.
The gentleman here in the second row is I think is pretty close if I heard him correctly. Here's some maths to do. There are about 332 million people in the United States as of the last census. We are collectively throwing away about 292 million tons of waste, total waste. That calculates to about a ton per year, closer to about 1,800 pounds per year. That's a lot, right? I mean, that's a F-350 full of junk every year by each and every one of us on average. Just to put that into more perspective, every one of us, every day of the year, January 1st through December 31st, is producing about 5 pounds per day. So, this is the total municipal solid waste generated in the United States according to the EPA's most recent statistics of 2018, and this is how it breaks down. Okay, just in the interest of time, I want to direct your attention to plastics. 12.2% of all that waste. I mean, think about 292 million tons. That's a volume. It's a mountain I can't even really comprehend. It's a big, big number. It's a lot of volume of waste. 12.2% of that is plastic. You're going to see that this talk is going to go largely toward plastics as a waste, because it's the number one behind food, which is heavy and very hard to recycle, and paper. So I call it the number one most under-recycled thing. 36 million tons, another number, smaller than 292 million, but a huge, huge number that's hard to wrap your brain around. But there's some good news. Since the EPA started tracking recycling rates in the 1960s, there has been this good hockey stick increase in use, right? In recycling rates. A huge increase because of legislation, because of just interest, because of people wanting to do right by the planet. So that's good. That's the good hockey stick that we want to see. The 10 most commonly recycled materials in the United States are these. We talked about paper and food. Food is not in this graphic because it's really a compostable product. But steel, concrete, computers and electronics, which we call e-waste. Lots of toxic chemicals in the e-waste as well, so that's a separate thing. And again, drawing your attention toward plastics, plastic bottles in particular. Plastics are a huge problem in our waste stream. Okay, here are some alarming statistics. More recent than the EPA's 2018, these are from 2022 from Hummingbird International. A little bit hard, even though it's a huge screen for some of you to see, so I'll draw your attention. Does this pointer work? Cool. It actually says that from 2015 to 2022, our overall recycling rate dropped from about 35% to just over 32% of all that stuff that we're throwing away. So we're only recycling around 30% of what we throw away total. It is estimated that 75% of everything we throw away is recyclable. If you take food out of that equation, which is very hard to recycle, most of what we throw away is recyclable in one way or another, right? But we're not doing that. We're only doing it at a rate of about 30% of all recycling. So, but here's a little bit of good news. Since 1980, the rate of recycling plastics has increased. An increase in recycling rate is good, 9%. Took us over 40 years to get there. So, a little bad news. So while that rate increased since 1980, since Reagan was elected, it increased up to 9%. Of all the plastics that we throw away, there's only about 9% which is actually being recycled into other products. And that, folks, is just a drop in the bucket. So here are some shocking, I think, plastic recycling facts. There are statistics like baseball in plastics recycling, but let me direct you to a few of these that are pretty profound. We are using collectively 5 million plastic bottles, and those are thrown away every hour in the United States. Maybe more during the Super Bowl, I don't know. That puts the figure around 35 billion plastic bottles annually, just in the United States. We're not even counting China and India and everywhere else, right? Kind of good news, I guess, the rate for plastic bottles recycling, that's PET, that's one type of the plastics I'm going to talk about here in a minute, is about 30%. So all those Dasani and Aquafina water bottles we're throwing away, about 30% of those are turned into new water bottles, carpet fibers, clothing fibers. So there's some good recycling around PET. We, of course, have a plastic ban in Colorado, and that is becoming de rigueur around the United States. However, my research showed me that there are still about 100 million plastic bags being produced annually. Plastic bags are generally made from a recyclable product, but they're so difficult to recycle because they clog up the traditional machinery, right? So they say, hey, collect those plastic bags, use them to clean up poop, or use something else. So collect them and send them to a recycler that is adept at recycling plastic bags. but don't put those into our recycling stream, and so they end up in landfills too. I thought this was sort of shocking. The average coffee sipping office worker uses 500 cups per year. I'm glad to see a lot of you using recyclable bottles with you today, but the average worker, 500 plastic bottles. Now, the 9-to-5er in America works about 260 days per year when you take out weekends and holidays. That means that they're actually wasting about 2 cups per day. And those cups, those paper cups, are typically lined with plastic, right? So that mixed use material, packaging material, is the hardest thing to recycle because it's very, very difficult to separate some of these plastics from paper, in this case, and other plastics. And this might seem like a non sequitur here at the bottom, but it takes about a half a gallon of oil to produce 1 pound of virgin plastic. Okay. We're not going to get into a geopolitical, economic discussion on oil, but I think you can see that the demand for plastic, in part, drives the demand for oil and all the problems that might cause in the world. So, some interesting facts to set the stage. That's some trends, some shocking, some good. And let me introduce you to a quick history of plastics. Has anybody ever seen this logo before? A couple people in the room. This is called the Chasing Arrows. It was developed in 1970 by a college student in California, actually to commemorate the very first Earth Day. Thought that was pretty cool to learn, right? Well, it was one of those symbols like the Nike swoosh or the McDonald's arches that became so instantly recognizable, and it was instantly, intrinsically associated with environmentalism, not necessarily recycling initially, but the Society of Plastics in 1988, which later became the Association of Standards Testing and Measurement. We'll get to that in a second. They didn't really have the most ecologically sound, mojo in the world at that time. So they took this symbol and tied it into their newly created resin identification code, or RIC coding system. Has anybody ever heard of that before? Awesome, that's why we're here to learn. So they took their RIC coding system for 7 different types of plastics. Those are the little numbers that are printed or stamped on the bottom of plastic stuff, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Talk a little bit more about that. And they tied in this internationally recognized symbol for environmentalism, which was genius on their part, I think. But it was at that point where they said, okay, we're going to try to communicate this recycling numbers with this recycling logo that kind of all hell broke loose. Those numbers were intended to communicate to the recyclers and the sorters and the separators which types of plastics, 1, 2, 4, 5, should be recycled and which types should not. It was supposed to communicate to Bruin Recycles and Montrose Recycles and actual separators, those things. It was never intended for you and me to look at that logo and say, hey, this is recyclable, and throw it into a recycle bin. Pretty interesting. In fact, the man himself says, that symbol was supposed to say, hey, look at this thing. It's recycled or it's recyclable. That's basically it. It's a pretty symbol. I designed it for Earth Day. That's all it was really meant to be. But it didn't take long, a few short decades later, and conventional wisdom incorrectly says that any product with that Chasing Arrows logo, that of course we've all seen, regardless of the number that's on there, says that it's recyclable. I mean, we love instantly recognizable symbols. I mentioned the Nike swoosh and the McDonald's arches. So anything with that Chasing Arrows logo must be recyclable, throw it in the bin. The problem is, you tell me, what's the problem if you have materials that are infinitely recyclable and should be recycled, and you're doing a good job, mixed in with stuff that shouldn't be in that bin and are not recyclable? What do we call that? Trash. It's definitely trash. In the business, it's called cross-contamination. So you have a cross-contaminated bin full of 1s and 2s, plastic water bottles and milk jugs, that's good. But you also have maybe some PVC or some styrofoam in there, that's bad. And the reality is, it takes so much time and energy and manpower, Abel Velarde will tell you this, that you just can't take your mixed contaminated recycling bin and separate it out into all these individual parts. So it all goes to the trash. 36 million pounds of plastic. 9% of that eventually turns into other products, but the rest of the 91% of all the plastics that we throw away, regardless of how well you're trying to separate them, is going into the landfill. Okay? So that's the most shocking statistic. And I'm here to tell you why. Most people have not heard of the RIC codes in this room. So let's spend just a little bit of time on that. RIC, again, stands for Resident Identification Code, and there are 7 different numbers, okay? You'll see that a few of these are in green, a few of them are in red. Green good, red bad. I'll talk a little bit more about that. We teach a 3 and sometimes 4-day environmental boot camp of all things environmental that the EPA regulates. And we talk a lot about these plastics and how to identify them and how we might do a better job recycling them. We don't really have time for that, but I will draw your attention to number 1 and 2, polyethylene terephthalate and high-density polyethylene. Those are the 2 that you'll deal with mostly. They are highly recyclable. You should be doing that. If you see a 1 or a 2, please put that in the recycling bin, right? But then we get to number 3. Thanks for putting them in order, Society of Plastics. 3 is not recyclable. That's PVC. So 1, 2, yes. 3, no. 4, 5, yes. 6, no. 7, no. PVC is irrigation pipe, automobile parts. I stop here to say that all plastics are recyclable to some degree, but the reality is it's not fiscally reasonable to do so. It costs so much money to take PVC pipe or automobile parts and turn them into something else that we don't really have a good way to do it, although I will talk about some emerging technologies to handle that. So 1 and 2, yeah, recycle your water bottles, recycle your milk jugs. They will be turned into more water bottles and milk jugs and carpet fiber and clothing fibers and other things. 4 and 5 are other types of containers, like yogurt. Flip it over, you'll probably see a 5 on it. Okay, clean that out. Go ahead and put that in your blue or green trash can for collection on Tuesdays or Wednesdays every other month, right? Every other week. And then we get into 6, polystyrene. I remember as a kid that styrofoam was going to kill the planet. That's still true. We can't recycle polystyrene very effectively today. And 7 is everything else. CDs, acrylics, hard plastics typically. Your automobile headlights are a number 7 type of plastic, and it's not very recyclable. Quick story. Is anybody confused, by the way? Because I am. I'm giving this presentation. On number 6, I bought a slab of meat from Safeway the other day, actually a couple months ago, and it was wrapped in clear plastic around a styrofoam tray. I knew it, I assumed it to be polystyrene, but you know, curiosity in me, I flip over everything that's plastic, and I flipped over this gray plastic tray. If you shop at Safeway and you buy meat, check it out, you'll find this to be true. The little dark gray plastic tray had a big number 2 stamped in the middle of the bottom of that thing. I got pretty excited. I said, Gabrielle, you know, Safeway is contracting with a supplier that has figured out how to make polystyrene out of number 2 recyclable plastic. It's pretty cool. Well, that 2 was about that big and very clearly stamped, but right next to it, not so clearly stamped, was a Chasing Arrows logo with a number 6 and a PS below it. Sure enough, it was polystyrene. But man, was that confusing. I was just about to throw that in the recycling bin and write a happy letter to the Safeway management, but it was in fact polystyrene. So the confusion is just overwhelming to recycle correctly. We're going to talk more about these in a little bit, so that's just a 101 introductory course on RIC codes. Let me reintroduce this alphabet soup. Actually, around the same time as Glacier National Park contacted us to do a solid waste survey, which we were very excited. In April, the EPA wrote a very urgently worded letter to the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. And in that letter, they basically said, all right, boys, this Chasing Arrows logo, while pretty, is a disaster for recycling. We are only recycling at a rate of 9%. We have 36 million tons of it going into the landfill. We got to do something. And they suggested that we completely scrap that whole system. So all of these Chasing Arrows logos that hopefully you've been looking at and trying to figure out what do these mean, they say, you know, we need to get rid of that because everybody associates the Chasing Arrows logo as recyclable. And if you have a 1 and a 5 and a 7 and a 3, it's all cross-contaminated, it's all trash. So let's get rid of that in favor of something else. These triangles. All right. So I'm not here to argue whether that was the best idea or if something else could have come up. I'm sure thousands, millions of your tax dollars were spent debating that very thing between these agencies. But I am here to tell you that this system, the solid triangles with a number next to it, or probably more often the hollow triangles with a number inside of it and still those letters below, is here to stay. The ASTM in their press release of this say they hope and intend and expect that this subtle change will bring back the focus on the system's core mission of resin identification. So, instead of seeing the Chasing Arrows logo and thinking, oh, that's recyclable, let's take care of it, and everything gets cross-contaminated, they say it's just a triangle, and they really want to focus on that number. And so we all need to understand what these numbers mean. 1 and 2, yeah. 4 and 5, yeah. 3, 6, 7, no, at least in Montrose. I'll get into that again. So again, I'm not debating the eventual efficacy of this change, but it is here and now. In fact, like it or not, it's here to stay, and to the point that California Senate Bill 343 has already made it, believe it or not, illegal to sell a product that has the Chasing Arrows logo on it if it's not in fact recyclable. So it's even more confusing. So you can have a water bottle that has a Chasing Arrows logo in California with the number 1 because that's recyclable. You can do that on number 2, that's recyclable. But you can't have Chasing Arrows logo around number 3 or 6, polystyrene, because it's not recyclable as easily. Well, because that's just too confusing, yes here, no there, they're just going to the triangles in California. And as we know, legislation in some of the larger states trickles into the rest of the country. So while it's not de rigueur here, it's going to be. We will eventually see probably only triangles and no more Chasing Arrows. Now, let me say that I don't believe the Chasing Arrows logo is ever going away. In the same way that the Nike swoosh and the M&M or the McDonald's arches are not going away. It has a beautiful place, it makes a groovy t-shirt, but they, as it relates to plastic recycling, is in fact going away in favor of that new symbolism, okay? So that's something that you should know. And in some places, it's already the law. Well, we've talked a lot about what we're doing wrong in the United States. What are we doing right? I will tell you that in Montrose Recycles and the residents are doing a pretty good job, given all this confusion, all the limitations to better recycling practices. We're doing a pretty good job. Has anybody been to their website? The Montrose Recycles website? Yeah? Cool. I'm glad that you have. It's been updated for 2024, and if you haven't, I encourage you to, and tell your kids to do it, and tell your kids' teachers to do that. There's a lot of great information on the Montrose website. This is only a clip of the top. It actually goes, if you scroll down, there's a lot more information about recycling dates and things like that. You can pick up your copy of the 2024 Single Stream Recycling Program Guide. It's available in Spanish. I do want to direct your attention here that right there on the homepage of Montrose Recycles, it tells you, hey, look for the symbol. 1, 2, 4, and 5 are recyclable. The problem is, I just told you guys about 10 minutes ago, and you guys haven't even heard of these RIC codes. So it's nice to say, look for these codes, and I think that's a great message. Do look for those codes. 1, 2, 4, and 5 are recyclable. Put those in your blue or green bin. They'll drag them out every other week for you. That's awesome. But we have to kind of explain what those things are, I think, a little bit better. It goes on to say, 3, 6, and 7 are not recyclable. PVC, polystyrene, all those other things. Don't put PVC products, styrofoam, coolers, polycarbonate items into there because those really are trash. I know that it's hard when we've been learning for 30, 40, 50, 60 years that we should be recycling plastics, but without knowing what kind of plastics, it's just better to throw it out. When in doubt, throw it out. If you don't know that it's a water bottle or a milk jug or a 4 or 5, go ahead and just throw it out. That would be best. What I really love about their website, and I'm going to argue is underdeveloped yet, is this symbol here. It's right there. It says 1, 2, 4, and 5. Look for the symbol. That's good, right? And this is the kind of simple, direct, clear messaging Gabrielle mentioned for Glacier National Park that we're helping them with, that I think we could do better as a community. And the more we're telling, hey buddy, look for that symbol before you throw it away. Is it a 1 or a 2 or a 4 or 5? Put it in the bin. If it's anything else, just throw it away. But you gotta know to look for the symbol, and you gotta know what that symbol means. So we gotta get that message out there a little bit more. I'm going to come back to some direct, simple, clear messaging, but I thought it might be interesting to know what our neighbors are doing. I don't want to pick on anybody. I've got family in Delta. I don't have any family in Telluride. The city of Delta, on their website, says, yeah, we'll recycle your clean cardboard. And you have to drop it off on West 4th Street. My cousin was actually mayor for a bit, Nathan Clay, and I got to tease him about this. But when you drop it off, only your clean cardboard, remove all the plastic and styrofoam and everything. Okay, so there's rules to their recycling. God bless them, they're trying. In Telluride, according to their website, they don't actually provide any town services, but they'll let you call Bruin and pay them, have them bring out a bin and arrange it yourself. So even Telluride is really not doing much in the recycling world. So compared to our, I'm not trying to exclude Olathe here, I love Olathe, but including our nearest larger neighbor and sort of our more wealthy neighbor to the south, we're doing a great job in Montrose, comparatively, okay? I do believe we can do a lot better, and we're gonna get into that. Clear, simple, direct messaging is what we need. We need everybody in here to say, yeah, I surely understand what 1 through 7 means, or at least I know that 1, 2, 4, and 5 are good, 3, 6, and 7 are bad. You don't have to know the chemical name of it or, for what it's used, but as long as you look for the symbol and know which ones are recyclable and you can communicate that to your neighbor, I think that's a huge step in the right direction. So I love that look for the symbol on the website. I also am a big fan of sort of pithy, catchy statements. I think that everybody wants to be in on the game. They want to be in the know. I was thinking kind of speakeasy style. Do you know the code? Hey buddy, what's on the bottom of your plastic? Do you know the code? I would make it fun, right? Like people want to be in on knowledge. I think knowledge is infectious. I also believe that while that website is awesome, it's designed for you and me, for adults who can manage that kind of information. But we got to get to the kids. In the 80s, when I was a little younger, there was a big drive to create recycling campaigns in our schools. Every school that I remember had a paper and an aluminum recycling bin. Maybe you guys remember that. Not so much in plastics, at least as my memory serves, but if we can get the kids today from the elementary school level, middle school level, high school, and certainly college campuses to kind of get involved in that, kids respond to things that are more sing-songy, right? 1, 2, make it new. 4, 5, keep them alive. 3, the rest, trash is best. I mean, I don't have a marketing degree. There are highly paid firms in Denver that will do that for us with infinite resources. But I do believe that there's a lot of intelligent, creative people in this room alone, and this is just one room in a great big city here. So these kinds of things I think we can incorporate at the elementary school level, get kids in this decade more invested in recycling that maybe has, according to that one statistic, has kind of dropped off. But fundamentally, we can always go back to this messaging, right? When in doubt, throw it out. It's actually on the Montrose Recycles website. It's a tenet of recycling. Even if you're holding a clear plastic thing and says, gosh, that looks like a water bottle, but I can't find the 1 or the 2, it's really just best to throw it away, because that cross-contamination is costing this city, and this community, and this country a lot of money. Just to elaborate that on a little bit, and I really want to leave enough time for questions, when we collect all that plastic as Montrose Recycles, but it's all cross-contaminated, we'll send all that trash to the MRF, the MRF, the recycling facility in Denver, and the portion of all that plastic or trash that is recyclable, they will return to us in credits. So they'll give the city of Montrose money back for the portion of the stuff that we send them that is in fact recyclable. However, because time and resources and money are not infinite, even the MRF can't take the time to sort that out. So we send them a bunch of cross-contaminated stuff, they look at it and says it's trash, and we get nothing. When that cross-contamination is lessened or eliminated, we'll get a lot more money back into the community when we're sending them actually recyclable stuff. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that, if there's any, save the planet, yes, but let's make some money at this at the same time. I contend that once you can kind of agree on some cute, pithy statements that we can rally around and get behind and just know off the top of my head, hey buddy, you know the code? We also need to tie that into some symbolism, right? We are visual learners mostly. And so if we can tie in symbolism, right here I'm using the Chasing Arrows logo because that's still everybody's front of mind awareness. I think the triangles are coming and we can't run away from that avalanche. When we tie in, do you know the code? To 1, 2, 4, and 5? Because in Montrose, those are good. You can recycle 1, 2, 4, and 5, right? Same symbolism, 3, 6, and 7. 3 and the rest, trash is best, those are bad. So this is the kind of bright, simple, clear, direct symbolism that I'd like to see in all kinds of messaging. I want this stuff plastered on the side of those great big 30-gallon bins on the side of the curb, right? look for the code. 1, 2, 4, and 5, green, 3, 6, 7, red, that kind of stuff. Taking that a step further, once you have cute statements, you've tied it into whatever easy to recognize, bright, clear symbolism you're going to use. This is something that we designed for Glacier National Park. It's exactly the size of a national park map insert because every single visitor to Glacier National Park and most national parks is offered a map, right? You go up to the ranger station, you pay them or present your card as a annual member, and what do they say? Would you like a map? Right? And they're all the same size. So we designed this little thing for them to use as a map insert. They also have one that says be bear aware. But we also know from the rangers that at that moment they have a captive audience for several minutes at least. They pay their fee, mom's driving, dad grabs the map, figures out where we're gonna go next, pulls out this map insert and has a few minutes to read this stuff. They actually read this stuff, those map inserts. So in their park, they're highly focused on just 1 and 2. Said, man, if we could just tackle the 1 and 2 problem, we would be so much farther down this good road. We don't really need to worry about 4s and 5s and the other recyclables. So they're really focusing on PET and HDPE. And then there's some more information because we have a temporarily captive audience. But that's the thing, we evolved from a good statement on the website to catchy phrases that we might all incorporate in our daily lives, to some symbolism, to then some actual marketing material. I have a dream. I was watching the waste management truck drive by, and good for them, they're promoting the fact that they run on clean burning natural gas. Good, it's a moving billboard. And I said, wait a second, what if we got buy-in from Waste Management or Bruin or all these huge trucks, and we pick a code, we pick a whatever term we're gonna use, and right there on the side of that thing it says, hey buddy, do you know the code? Right? What if that's on the truck? What if we, fully embrace these new symbols that we can't run away from and say, 1 or 2, make it new, using the right symbolism. When in doubt, throw it out. I mean, there are all kinds of great ideas that could be employed to share this vision. I could just see those trucks driving by and piquing people's interest. So there's a lot about what we're doing wrong, a lot about what we're doing right and how we can improve. Let me tell you about some of the emerging technologies without getting into the weeds on them, because literally every developed country on the planet is trying to solve this problem. There are billions of dollars being spent on emerging technologies. There's chemical recycling, mechanical recycling, dissolution using solvents to separate the materials. There's organic recycling, and then with the increased use of artificial intelligence, recycling robots. So very, very quickly, chemical recycling will, after the fossil fuels, that half a gallon creates 1 pound of virgin plastic. It gets turned into a product, we use it, we throw it away, and at that point, if we can incorporate some chemical recycling, that'll take that plastic back down to its virgin equivalent plastic, and it goes right back into the cycle. We can eliminate the oil and the energy that is necessary to create virgin plastic. So that's where chemical recycling comes into place. A lot of countries are spending a lot of money developing that technology. Mechanical recycling is exactly what it seems. We're going to take plastics, we're going to chop them up, wash them, sort them, shred them, and then turn them back into new plastics. That's been around for a while, but there are technologies coming out that makes that much better, that we don't have to worry about a cross-contaminated base. We'll just chop up everything and reuse all of those plastics. Dissolution, I mentioned, using a solvent to take a polymer, more than one monomer, down to its base monomer plastics, back to a virgin plastic, and reusing it, again, eliminating the need for that virgin plastic or oil. Organic recycling is just starting with a product. So that bottle over there could be something which, when it hits the landfill, will just biodegrade and turn into productive soil. That's awesome. And there are a lot of technologies using algae and other things to create plastics that will actually just biodegrade. So we don't even have to feel guilty about throwing it away. But boy, is that confusing, because that's out there in little bits. 7th Generation is one company that's doing it. But if we don't understand what is and what is not recyclable, what is and is not biodegradable, we're just going to have the same problem. So there's some exciting stuff in organic recycling. And then those recycling robots I mentioned, using artificial intelligence, an entire messy mess can come down the conveyor belt, and AI is separating them out into their individual components. That's pretty cool technology. and really ultimately would eliminate our worry about cross-contamination, because the AI will take care of it. Right before Terminator lands. So, all that stuff is cool. There are some great emerging technologies. Now that we're all educated which codes to look out for and what is and what is not recyclable, we're teaching the kids in the schools. I feel like the limitations to more effective, better recycling, the reason why you're doing it wrong is because the confusion is so huge. You guys didn't even know what the RIC codes were. No, that's not your fault. It's very, very confusing. They're tiny, tiny little things. They're stamped on the bottom of polystyrene that makes it look like a number 2. It's very, very confusing, right? Is it good? Is it bad? Are we using this symbol? Are we using that symbol? What's going on? It's just too confusing. And when I get confused, man, I just don't care anymore. So the temporary cure for confusion is apathy. I'm just not going to do it. And that's kind of what's going on in the planet right now. It's too confusing to figure out how to recycle plastics in particular. And for Montrose Recycles and any recycling facility, any community that really wants to do this, it takes a lot of time, money, and energy, doesn't it? And we just don't have the infinite resources and personnel to really do a better job. We're doing the best that we can with what we've got, given these limitations. Well, I was taught, if you're going to bring up a problem, you should probably offer a solution. So I believe that the best solution to confusion is education. It's what we're doing here right now, trying to educate a small group. Hopefully you'll take that on. I believe that if you educate people about what we can do, what we are doing right, what we can do better, what we're doing wrong and how to avoid that, right? That education will hopefully breed enthusiasm. I don't know about you, but if I learned something, I want to share it with somebody. I just found a new hiking trail. Want to go hiking with me? I found this great new trail, right? So if you learn about the RIC codes and it's interesting and it's exciting to you, go share it with somebody. I think enthusiasm breeds enthusiasm. That generates cooperation, right? I want the city of Montrose to cooperate with the town of Delta. I would like communities to better cooperate with Montrose Recycles and develop better programs. We don't even have a small business recycling program. We own a small business on Main Street. We've got an alley. We lease to Wild Marion, our neighbor. She really wants to recycle all that cardboard that comes into her shop for all her pretty clothing, but there isn't a small business recycling program in Montrose at all. So she, God bless her, she takes it home, chops it up and puts it in her bin. I bet her driver's wondering why her recycling bin is full every single week. But there are grants by the federal government, by the state government. There are donations from private companies to help us with these things. In fact, our little tiny company, Gabrielle's and mine, has, with the help of some people in this room, have applied for a grant from the Colorado Division of Public Health and the Environment for a grant to help us spread this message to more people. So we can go with cooperation from the city of Montrose and the library district and CMU spread this message, which goes all the way back to education, breeds enthusiasm, cooperation. So there's stuff that's out there. And I do believe that success breeds success because people want to be on a winning team. I can't wait for the day that Delta City Council comes to us and says, hey, you guys have a very effective recycling program. You're actually getting money back from the MRF. How are you doing that? Because people want to be on a winning team. And I think fundamentally people want to do the right thing. So I believe that if we can combat this confusion and this apathy, this lack of understanding with education and enthusiasm, pithy statements, cool messaging, stuff like that, yeah, one day, not only does Montrose recycle, but we'll say that Montrose recycles right. Did it do it? I worked on that slide. Lots of time for questions. Yes, sir.
Okay, let me circulate the mic. We'll start over here and work our way that way.
Oftentimes, when the trash truck comes by, they throw the bags and trash in the same truck. Does that mean at the other end, they separate out the bags from the trash, or what? How does it work?
Probably not. Once everything goes into that trash truck, and I could talk to Abel Velarde and learn more, that's probably the end of it. That's cross-contaminated. It's just gonna end up in a landfill. Short answer, not the one you want.
Why do they just do, make two trucks? Why sometimes just one?
So I might not know what's going on in your community, but where I live, there's a trash truck that comes around every Monday and a separate recycling truck that comes around every other Tuesday. So in my community, and I got a nasty letter when I first moved in that says, hey, stop putting your recyclables in a plastic bag, because that plastic bag isn't recyclable. So at least they were communicating back to me. But we have a Montrose Recycles truck that comes around every other Tuesday, and I'm fairly confident that that goes and goes through the recycling stream. Is that what you're talking about?
Sometimes, some weeks you get two, well, every other week you
Right.
get two, but some weeks there's only one truck.
Okay.
When it's supposed to be two.
Okay. I would have to look into that.
Everything goes into that one truck.
I would have to look into that, and feel free to reach out to Montrose Recycles and ask them that exact question. Say, hey, I don't think you're picking it up right in my area, and let's talk about that. Because they're absolutely willing to and trying to do the right thing. It's good to know.
Is there any effort to change the way the numbers appear on the bottom? Because as you get older, it's harder and harder to read them, and I'm tired of finding my reading glasses just to find out what the number is.
Right. I mean, Coca-Cola should send out a pair of cheaters every time they sell a six-pack of Coke. I think that will come via legislation. I think with this changing symbolism and technology, and some of the things that I've read, is that manufacturers will be obligated to make this stuff legible. I remember probably in the 80s or 90s when print advertising was required to be at least of a 6-point font for that very reason in print, right? Which is still very, very tiny, but at least it's not 1-point font. So I think that is going to come, and honestly, the only way that's going to happen widespread is probably by legislation, and that comes from influence from below. So we call our legislators and said, hey, you've got to pressure Coca-Cola and Pepsi to make this stuff legible. Yeah. Sir?
Perhaps I'm missing something, but doesn't it make more sense to put a plus on the bottom of recyclable plastic and nothing else on the bottom?
Man, I like your thinking. You should join the Society of Plastics, because if they had done that, so it's something that I had wanted to mention before. I think you're 100% correct, by the way. If the Society of Plastics back in 1988, instead of co-opting this logo that meant recyclability and meant environmentalism, had done a better job and did whatever, a plus is, I think that's a great idea, just a plus and a minus, or a X and a check, something like that made it brain dead simple to look at this thing and say yes or no. We wouldn't be in this position today. I'm not blaming just the Society of Plastics and that symbolism, but that is where it pretty much all began. And I would love to see, this is just Kevin Clay speaking, this triangles ultimately evolve into something even simpler like that and make it mandated. Yeah, thank you very much. Hi.
Isn't it always the mic is
Oh,
down
sorry.
here.
So you might be able to answer this about Montrose Recycling. I went on the website just to find out about the caps and lids.
Yeah.
So caps, obviously, water bottles, that's a cap, you throw it away. A lid, something like a yogurt container, it's the same stuff, can't you toss that in there? So what's the answer?
That's a great question, and I do have a partial answer. Sometimes the lid is the same stuff. Lids are very often not stamped, and the container is. So we might assume that it's the same stuff, but typically a lid needs to be stronger. So a lid could be, in fact, number 3 PVC, whereas the container is a number 4 or 5. Okay, so that's one reason. If you just throw the whole thing in, it's likely to be cross-contaminated. I asked Abel Velarde that exact question, and the answer I got was a little surprising. It's a little bit more practical. If you have lids on water bottles and containers and stuff, all of that plastic, for the ease of transportation, gets crushed into big bales of plastic, right? Well, imagine if you had capped bottles getting crushed, they start blowing up under pressure. And even worse, the ones that don't blow up and cause problems for the machinery or the personnel doing that, as they get transported along I-70 to the MRF in Denver, you got bottle caps and lids and pumps flying off, causing hazards. So that's actually the practical answer to that. It's literally just a hazard. The other answer is that very often we think it's the same material, it's colored the same way, it feels the same, but it may not be. And if you start looking closely at these things, if the lid is actually stamped separately from the container, you might find out that there's a 2 and a 5 or a 4 and a 3 very often. Yeah, great question, thank you.
We've been putting putting our plastic bags for years in the recycle at the grocery stores.
Oh, good.
Is that futility? I mean.
It's not. Thank you. Thank you very much for asking that. As I said, the plastic bags are very often, not always, made from a recyclable material, but because they're so thin, conventional machinery gets all gummed up when it runs through and it's trying to get crushed. So they say, bring those, separate those, we'll collect them for you, and then we will send them in bulk somewhere that can handle it properly. So keep doing it. Good job, you're saving the planet.
To follow up on that, grocery stores are no longer taking plastic bags, but Walmart still has a receptacle where you can leave plastic bags and extensions of that, plastic shrink wrap and other things like that. Is that, are we wasting our time, or is that cross-contaminating the bags and?
Putting shrink wrap in with the plastic bags?
Yeah, just because it feels like a plastic bag and it's light plastic, and that would be appropriate to go in plastic bag recycle. I can find out that for you, because off the top of my head, I can't remember if shrink wrap and most plastic bags are the same. Not all plastic bags are the same either. Most of them are a recyclable material, usually one or two, but they could be made out of something else. Kind of feel the difference when you get a firmer plastic bag. It might not be, but keep doing it. And I would say you're probably not cross-contaminating it, because the volume of that shrink wrap, once it gets melted or crushed, is so small that it's probably not going to affect the rest of the bags. So I would say keep doing that. Absolutely. Great question.